My beloved child, what happened today was never supposed to happen. One innocent question from a child shattered years of silence in just a few seconds. Your soulmate's face changed the moment those words were spoken. Because the secret they had buried for so long could no longer stay hidden. Listen carefully. No one expected the afternoon to unfold this way. The room was filled with ordinary conversations, quiet smiles, and familiar faces pretending everything was normal. Your soulmate had spent years mastering the art of hiding emotions. They had convinced everyone around them that the past was gone forever. They smiled when expected, spoke when necessary, and buried every memory connected to you deep inside their heart. They believed that if they never spoke your name again, eventually even their own heart would forget. But the soul never forgets what heaven has written. Some connections refuse to disappear, no matter how much time passes. On that very day, destiny chose the smallest voice in the room to reveal what every adult had failed to notice. Don't skip. Because this moment was not an accident. It was the beginning of everything changing. The child looked at your soulmate with complete innocence. There was no hidden intention, no manipulation, no plan. Just pure curiosity that only children possess. Everyone continued talking until the child suddenly asked, "Why do your eyes become sad whenever someone says that name?" At first, nobody understood what the child meant. The room became strangely quiet. Your soulmate froze completely. Their hands stopped moving. Their breathing became heavier. For years they had successfully hidden every emotion behind carefully chosen words and practiced smiles, but one simple question broke through every wall they had built around their heart. They tried to laugh it off, pretending it meant nothing, yet the silence that followed spoke louder than any answer they could have given. The family members exchanged confused glances. Some smiled awkwardly, believing it was simply a child's imagination. Others noticed something much deeper. They saw tears beginning to gather in your soulmate's eyes. It had been years since anyone had witnessed such an expression. They had always appeared strong, calm, and emotionally distant. But this moment was different. Something buried long ago had suddenly awakened. The child continued watching them without fear, almost as if heaven itself had whispered those words into such a young heart. Sometimes children notice truths adults spend their entire lives ignoring. Your soulmate remembered the promise they had made years earlier. It was the promise to never speak about you again. They believed silence would protect everyone from pain. They convinced themselves that forgetting was an act of kindness. Yet every birthday, every holiday, every quiet evening reminded them of the life they had imagined with you. They secretly kept small memories hidden where no one could ever find them. A photograph folded inside an old book. A handwritten note locked away in a forgotten drawer. A date they never celebrated publicly but always remembered privately. Nobody knew those memories still existed. Everyone believed they had moved on. Only heaven knew the truth. Don't skip. Because what happened next shocked even those who believed they knew your soulmate better than anyone else. The child asked another question. This one was even simpler. If you don't love that person anymore, why do you still protect their secret? The room fell completely silent. No one laughed this time. Even those who had been talking moments before slowly turned toward your soulmate. Every heartbeat seemed louder than before. Your soulmate lowered their head because they realized something terrifying. They had spent years hiding the truth from everyone except themselves. Deep inside, they had never stopped protecting you. They had accepted blame they did not deserve. They had remained silent while others misunderstood the story. They believed carrying the burden alone was the only way to keep you safe. Suddenly an older family member stood up. Their expression changed completely. They quietly admitted they had noticed strange things over the years but never understood why. They remembered finding your soulmate staring at an old message late one night. They remembered hearing your name whispered during sleep. They remembered seeing tears quickly wiped away whenever someone mentioned marriage or new beginnings. At the time they ignored every sign. Now the child's innocent question connected every missing piece together. Your soulmate finally looked toward the window. The sunlight reflected across the room exactly as it had years before on the day everything changed between you. Memories returned with overwhelming force. They remembered words left unsaid. Goodbyes that were never truly spoken. Sacrifices no one had ever understood. Most importantly, they remembered the promise they made to protect the truth even if it meant losing you forever. Their heart had carried that promise every single day. No one realized another person sitting quietly in the corner had suddenly become extremely nervous. Their hands began shaking almost uncontrollably. They avoided eye contact with everyone. For years they had hoped the truth would remain buried forever. They knew that if your soulmate ever found the courage to speak honestly, their own deception would finally be exposed. They silently prayed the conversation would end before anyone asked another question. But destiny had different plans. The child smiled gently and pointed toward an old wooden box resting on a nearby shelf. "Is that where you hid the real story?" The child asked without hesitation. Your soulmate's eyes instantly widened. Because inside that forgotten box was something no one in the family had ever seen. In opening it would reveal a secret that could change every life in that room forever. The room remained completely silent after the child's unexpected words. No one dared move toward the old wooden box. It had rested on that shelf for years, collecting dust, almost invisible to everyone who entered the house. Yet today it suddenly felt as though every eye in the room was being pulled toward it. Your soulmate stared at the box with a mixture of fear and disbelief. They had hidden it there believing no one would ever notice it again. They never imagined that an innocent child would point directly at the one place where every unanswered question had been sleeping for years. Don't skip. Because what was hidden inside that box was far more powerful than anyone could have imagined. Slowly, your soulmate walked toward the shelf. Every step felt heavier than the last. Their hands trembled before they even touched the lid. The older family members watched in confusion while the younger ones exchanged uncertain glances. No one understood why opening one forgotten box could make someone so emotional. But deep inside, your soulmate already knew. They knew that once the lid was lifted, there would be no returning to the carefully built silence they had lived behind for so long. The truth would finally have a voice. Before opening it, they closed their eyes for a brief moment. Memories rushed back all at once. The last conversation with you. The promise that neither of you would expose the real reason everything ended. The tears hidden behind forced smiles. The sacrifices that had never been explained to anyone. For years they carried those memories alone, believing protecting your name was more important than defending themselves. That decision had cost them friendships, family trust, and countless sleepless nights. Yet they never regretted protecting you. The lid finally opened. Inside was no jewelry, no money, no valuable treasure. Instead, there were carefully folded letters tied together with a faded ribbon. Beneath them rested a photograph no one had ever seen before. There was also a small notebook with worn pages and an old envelope that had never been opened. The moment your soulmate looked at those items, tears filled their eyes. Every object carried a chapter of a story they had tried desperately to forget. One family member whispered softly, "What are those?" Your soulmate struggled to answer. Their voice cracked before a single word came out. Finally they said, "These are the pieces of a life I thought I had buried forever." The room became even quieter. The child slowly walked closer and asked another innocent question. "If these memories hurt so much, why didn't you throw them away?" That question pierced even deeper. Your soulmate smiled through tears and quietly replied, "Because some memories stop hurting. But they never stop being precious." Those words changed the atmosphere completely. For the first time, everyone realized this had never been a story about forgetting someone. It had always been a story about protecting someone they still cared about. Don't skip. Because another discovery was only seconds away. An elderly relative carefully picked up the oldest letter. The handwriting looked familiar, yet no one could immediately remember where they had seen it before. Your soulmate gently took the letter back before anyone could unfold it completely. "Not yet," they whispered. "Some truths deserve to be told in the right order." But destiny had already decided otherwise. As they lifted the bundle of letters, a folded paper slipped onto the floor. It unfolded by itself. Across the top of the page, written in large handwriting, was one sentence that stunned everyone. "If anything ever separates us, promise me you will never let them blame you." The entire room froze. Several family members immediately looked toward your soulmate. One person quietly asked, "Who wrote that?" Your soulmate could no longer hide the truth. They did. The answer echoed through the room like thunder. For years everyone believed your soulmate had walked away by choice. They believed you had simply disappeared without explanation. But this single sentence revealed something completely different. It suggested that someone else had been involved. Someone who wanted both of you separated while making it appear completely natural. Suddenly the nervous family member sitting in the corner stood up so quickly that their chair nearly fell over. "I think we've talked about enough for today," they said hurriedly. Nobody moved. Nobody answered. Everyone noticed the panic in their voice. The older relative slowly turned toward them and quietly asked, "Why are you afraid of a letter written years ago?" The room fell into another long silence. Your soulmate looked at that person with an expression no one had ever seen before. It wasn't anger. It wasn't hatred. It was recognition. For the first time in years, they realized the person standing in front of them knew much more than they had ever admitted. The child looked between the two of them and innocently asked the final question of the day. "Were you the reason they had to say goodbye?" The color drained from that person's face. No one had accused them. No one had mentioned their name. Yet they suddenly looked exactly like someone carrying a secret far too heavy to hide any longer. Your soulmate slowly reached for the unopened envelope lying at the bottom of the box. Their hands trembled once again. Because they remembered exactly what was inside. It was the one message they had promised never to reveal. And it contained the name of the person who had secretly kept you and your soulmate apart for all those years. The unopened envelope rested quietly in your soulmate's hands, yet its weight felt greater than anything they had ever carried. Years had passed since they last looked at it. The paper had grown old, the edges slightly worn, but the seal remained untouched exactly as it had been on the day it was hidden away. Everyone in the room watched without saying a single word. Even the child who had unknowingly uncovered the entire mystery stood completely still, sensing that something extraordinary was about to happen. Don't skip. Because the next few moments would change the way everyone remembered the past forever. Your soulmate gently traced their fingers across the envelope. They remembered the promise attached to it. Only open this if the truth can no longer remain hidden. At the time, they believed that day would never come. They thought silence would last forever. They accepted misunderstanding. They accepted loneliness. They accepted being judged by people who never knew the real story. But today everything was different. One innocent question had already broken years of silence. There was no reason to hide anymore. Taking a slow breath, your soulmate carefully broke the seal. Inside was a single handwritten letter. Nothing more. No photographs. No money. No legal documents. Just one letter that carried enough truth to shake every person standing there. Your soulmate unfolded it with trembling hands. Before they could begin reading, they stopped. Tears filled their eyes once again. Every word on that page reminded them of a promise, a sacrifice, and a love that had survived even when everything else had fallen apart. One elderly relative quietly whispered, "Please read it." After several moments of silence, your soulmate nodded. The first sentence alone left the entire room speechless. If you are reading this today, it means the truth has finally found its way back to you. Nobody moved. Nobody even breathed loudly. The words continued. Please don't blame yourself. None of this happened because you failed. Someone convinced us that staying apart would protect everyone we loved. We believed them because we trusted them. We never imagined that trust would become the biggest mistake of our lives. As those words echoed through the room, several family members lowered their heads. They suddenly realized that the story they had believed for years had never been complete. Don't skip. Because the letter was only beginning. Your soulmate continued reading. There was one person who always feared what our future would become if we stayed together. They smiled in front of us while secretly creating distance between us. They carried messages that were never delivered. They changed conversations before they reached us. They allowed misunderstandings to grow because they believed separation was the safest answer. Gasps quietly spread through the room. Everyone slowly turned toward the same nervous family member who had tried to stop the conversation earlier. Their hands were shaking uncontrollably. Sweat covered their face. Yet they still said nothing. Your soulmate paused once more. Their voice became softer than before. I wanted to tell you the truth many times. But every attempt was stopped before it reached you. If one day a child uncovers this secret, don't ignore them. Children often hear what adults refuse to listen to. The moment those words were spoken, every eye turned toward the child. No one could explain it. Years before today's events, that sentence had already predicted that a child would reveal the hidden truth. A deep silence filled the room. The child looked confused. I didn't do anything, they whispered. Your soulmate knelt beside them with tears in their eyes. No, they replied gently. You reminded us that honesty doesn't need age. Sometimes the smallest voice carries the biggest truth. Several relatives quietly wiped tears from their faces. The atmosphere had completely changed. No one was arguing anymore. No one was defending old opinions. Instead, everyone was beginning to question everything they had believed for years. Then the oldest member of the family slowly stood up. With a trembling voice they asked only one question. If someone truly kept both of you apart, why didn't they ever confess? No one answered immediately. Instead, the nervous family member suddenly walked toward the door. Fast. Almost running. But before they could leave, the child spoke once again. Why are you leaving before hearing the last page? The room froze. That person stopped walking. Very slowly. They turned around. Fear was written all over their face. Your soulmate looked down at the letter. There was still one final page folded underneath. the page they had never noticed before. Their heartbeat raced. With shaking fingers, they unfolded it. Across the top was a sentence written in darker ink than the rest. The person responsible will eventually try to leave the room before this page is read. Every face instantly turned toward the person standing beside the door. Complete silence followed. No one needed to ask another question. No one needed an explanation. For the first time in years, the hidden truth was no longer hiding. But as your soulmate prepared to read the final paragraph, they noticed something even more shocking. At the bottom of the page, there was a second signature. A signature that did not belong to you. A signature belonging to someone everyone in that room trusted completely. And its revelation was about to expose an even deeper betrayal than anyone had imagined. For several long seconds, no one spoke. Every pair of eyes remained fixed on the second signature at the bottom of the page. Your soulmate stared at it over and over again, hoping they had misunderstood what they were seeing. But the handwriting was unmistakable. It belonged to someone the entire family had trusted without question for years. Someone who had always appeared kind, supportive, and honest. Someone who had comforted people during difficult moments, offered advice when conflicts arose, and convinced everyone they only wanted peace. Don't skip. Because sometimes the person who appears to protect everyone is the very person hiding the deepest truth. Your soulmate slowly whispered the name written beneath the signature. The room instantly filled with shock. Several relatives stepped backward in complete disbelief. One person covered their mouth with both hands. Another quietly shook their head, refusing to accept what they had just heard. No. That can't be possible, someone whispered. They were the one who always encouraged us to stay united. They were the one who told us everything happened naturally. But the letter told a different story. Your soulmate continued reading with trembling hands. Please do not hate this person. They believed they were preventing greater pain. They thought separating us would save the family from conflict. They never realized that every lie they created only produced deeper wounds. Their intentions may have begun with fear. But fear slowly became deception. Those words changed the atmosphere once again. This was no longer a story about revenge. It was a story about choices. One fearful decision had grown into years of silence, misunderstanding, and heartbreak. The family member standing near the door finally lowered their head. Their shoulders began shaking. For years they had rehearsed excuses in their mind, believing this day would never come. Yet now every carefully built explanation seemed completely meaningless. The oldest relative looked directly at them. You knew, didn't you? The answer did not come immediately. Instead, tears slowly rolled down their face. I knew part of it, they admitted quietly. But not everything. Gasps echoed across the room. Your soulmate closed their eyes. Those words confirmed what they had secretly feared all along. The truth had never been hidden by one person alone. Several people had carried different pieces of it. Some stayed silent out of fear. Some remained quiet out of guilt. Some simply convinced themselves that too much time had already passed to fix anything. Don't skip. Because the biggest revelation had not yet arrived. Your soulmate reached deeper into the wooden box. Everyone assumed it was empty. It wasn't. Hidden beneath a false wooden bottom was one final object. A small cloth pouch. It had never been opened. Your soulmate carefully untied the string. Inside was a delicate silver pendant. The moment they saw it, they completely broke down.